So I moved to San Diego. A bunch of them went with me, and we reopened, get ready for this, you'll recognize this name, Meta International in San Diego. That's when the name was born. It wasn't Meta before that.
Did Mark Zuckerberg have to pay you royalties for that? Doesn't
Who?
he own Mark Zuckerberg? Doesn't he own it now? The owner of Facebook?
He better pay me because I had it long before he did.
That's what I mean. Does he have to pay you?
Yeah, long before he did. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Connect Unplugged Podcast number 35 with Meta and NLP co-creator, someone who's been there from the very, very beginning, Frank Pucelik, who's joining us and streaming in live from the Ukraine. So we very, very much appreciate the time zone differences that we have at the moment and that you were here with Callum and myself today, sharing this with our audience. And I'll let Callum, share with the world a little bio about yourself, Frank.
Yeah, who is this character?
Who is this guy?
Thanks very much, Connor. I'm really excited to have one of the co-founders of NLP with us here today. Frank Pucelik is a pioneering figure in the development of Neuro-Linguistic Programming, working alongside with Richard Bandler and John Grindler during its formative years in the 1970s. Known for his expertise in communication, group dynamics, and trauma recovery, Pucelik contributed to foundational NLP tools like the meta model of communication. A Vietnam War veteran, he has dedicated much of his career to helping individuals overcome trauma and PTSD, as well as applying NLP principles to leadership development and organizational effectiveness. As an international trainer and consultant, Pucelik has delivered impactful workshops on personal development, therapeutic interventions, and corporate strategy. He is the author of The Origins of Neuro-Linguistic Programming and remains a passionate advocate for the ethical and practical applications of NLP everyday life. Thank you, Frank, for being here. Connor and I have been we're big NLP geeks at heart, and we've been incredibly excited to have you here. It's kind of like one of those surreal moments in our careers where we get to speak to someone of your caliber, someone who was around at the very beginning of, I guess, the inception, the birth of NLP and what it was formerly called Meta. And, you know, we'd love to hear all about that. We'd love to hear what it was like at those early days where you were discovering this new frontier for the very first time and what it was like back then.
Yeah, happily. 1971, actually. You ready for me to kind of get going?
Yeah.
Bring it out. Let's go. Okay. I was a graduate student at the University of California at Santa Cruz. I was training partners with Richard Bandler and John Grindler. We didn't do NLP. There was no NLP then. But Richard and I got together and we were teaching Gestalt to college students at the University of California at Santa Cruz. Gestalt was a big deal then. And he and I were quote unquote both experts in Gestalt. And we had a lot of experience in Gestalt. Richard was really good at it, mostly because he was willing to be as ornery and as nasty as possible. And in the early days of Gestalt, that was a good deal. And me, I was kind of not of the same ilk, but not far.
Yeah.
I was raised very difficultly. My mother was very violent and a drunk. My parents were both drunks, and I often had to climb over them to get out of my bedroom and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night because they were all collapsed out in the hallway and stuff. And they fought constantly, physically fought with each other. And my mother was, when she was drunk, she was pretty crazy. And I was physically beaten a lot until I was about 17, when I finally swung back. And I'd had enough, and, respecting your mother and all of that bit finally had run its course. And she was chasing me down the hallway and getting ready to hit me with something. And I turned around and something just snapped in me and I just went, no, boom, and caught her absolutely unsuspecting with a beautiful, beautiful right hook
Right.
and knocked her out cold in one swing. And then after that, every time she started to become violent or acted like she was going to be violent, I just look at her and go, come on, So thank God when I was 17, I finally did something to stop the physical abuse that I had for all those years. But I think it taught me a lot of things. I had a terrible self-image in those days. I didn't think much of myself, and there was no NLP in those days.
Yeah.
And I was a psychology student at the university, so I was studying psychology and studying Gestalt. That's how Richard and I ended up together, training students in Gestalt. And after a period of time, there was this weird-looking new university professor with long, scraggly hair and kind of hippie stylish in those days. And he started coming to our Gestalt training groups.
Right.
We didn't know who the hell he was. And he would just walk into the back of the room, sit down in a chair, sit like this for the whole time, and then get up and walk out. When it was over, he didn't say a word, for 3 or 4 times. And finally, I stopped him when he was leaving because he actually waited long enough so that he was the only one left in the room besides Richard and I. And I said, who the hell are you? And he goes, oh, I'm a new college professor here. And it was John Grinder, for God's sake.
Crazy.
Yeah. And he said, do you mind? He says, do you mind if I ask you guys some questions about what you're doing? I went, nah, hell, I don't care. And without realizing what he was doing, he was asking neuro-linguistic questions. He was asking questions that were based in the structure of language. He was a linguist, a professional linguist, and very, very good at it. And he was incredibly curious about how we came up with some of the questions we had, some of the ideas we had, and some of the strategies that we used to create change. He was amazed because Richard and I, for whatever reason, were really good at Gestalt. And we would do things with volunteer clients during a session, and they would be changed, and appearingly forever. And John was going, how the hell do you do that?
Because he was a linguistic expert, and he would see yourself and Richard literally just talking to people and getting them to do different processes, and all of a sudden change would occur, and they wouldn't have the old pattern of behavior at all in their life. Is that fair synopsis?
So say that one more time. I think you've got something special there. What was that?
So when John Grinder was in the lecture room watching
With us.
himself and Richard,
Yeah.
his specialty was in linguistics.
Yeah.
And he would see yourself and Richard just using language create phenomenal change with the demonstration subjects.
Right. Exactly.
And
right.
over time, how long was that time? How long was he?
He just simply observed and didn't say anything to us for about 2 months. But remember, that's once a week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Once a week for 3 or 4 hours in an evening. And he would come in, sit down. And then after about 2 months, he didn't leave when everybody else left. He stayed. And he's sitting there, looking at Richard and I, and we're going, yeah. And he started asking us questions about our language structure. Now, we didn't know how the hell to answer him because we didn't know really what he was saying. He was using transformational grammar terms, which Richard and I knew nothing about. But what he was doing was being very, very accurate with the way he asked questions. And Richard and I both looked at each other and looked at him and go, who the hell is this dude?
Right.
This guy is special, And Richard and I would talk about him when he wasn't there after he left. And we decided to invite him on a regular basis. And then we stayed after the students in Gestalt left. And the three of us would then talk about what were the language structures and what were all, and basically John taught us meta. He taught us the meta model. And Richard and I were both like, whoa, that's incredible. That's really, really powerful stuff. And he really liked what he was getting from us. And we really liked what we were getting from him. It was a marriage made in heaven.
Yeah.
At the right time in the right place. Because the whole humanistic movement was blossoming like a flower at the same time. And psychologists were suddenly becoming human beings and helping people be happy instead of telling people in big words what's wrong with them.
Yeah.
Which is what psychology was in the beginning, And John didn't like that either. So when he found us, he found Richard and I doing something that he thought actually had some meaningful, long-term, positive change in the people that were in our Gestalt groups. And our Gestalt groups got very popular, and very quickly they stopped being Gestalt groups and became meta groups.
Meta groups.
So the birth of meta was in 1972. That's when we shifted from paying more attention to Gestalt structures and switched over because, by the way, one of my friends during that time, I don't know if you know these names, but was a lady named Virginia Satir.
Oh, yes. We know Virginia.
Virginia Satir and were buddies. She wanted to learn. When she joined us about 2 or 3 years after we started, because she heard about us and she wanted to learn meta. We had already built meta at the time, which is the 9 linguistic structures. And she said that she listened to us when we were doing interviews with people. And she said, I've never heard anybody that accurate or that explicit with language when you're talking about what you can't see. You're talking about thoughts and ideas in a person's head. And she said, you guys are using these language things that you're doing to absolutely nail the function of those thoughts, not the content. She didn't care about making a bunch of new words. She wanted to know how people think. And what she discovered was meta, which she learned from us, was the tools that she needed to really advance her own career and advance her own understanding. And so she and I traveled together for 2 years. I taught her meta and she taught me family systems for 2 years. Wonderful time. She not only was it a wonderful time intellectually, but she was really a good person and a friend.
So meta, so John had he created or modeled from psychology words?
No, he was an
systems?
expert in transformational grammar.
Right.
He was a linguist.
Yes.
What he discovered when he was listening and observing Richard and I doing work with clients, that there were certain linguistic structures
Within what
that
you
we were using, that we didn't know the names of them, but that we were using that were creating an incredible amount of very quick change. And he knew what the structures were. He knew the names of the structures.
He could articulate it and put words on them.
Yes.
Basically, yeah, okay.
And then go the next step, because his structure had a very logical transformation from step to step. And we're listening to this crazy guy who's not a psychologist. He doesn't know crap about people, but he knows about information. Oh my goodness. And especially verbal. And so we then used his wisdom to create more powerful structures with Gestalt, more powerful. We took apart TA, transactional analysis, Virginia Satir, conjoint family systems, a Gestalt. We took apart a whole lot of psychology systems using what John and Richard and I built in those days called meta.
And where did the name meta come from? What?
Meta for all three of us was the perfect name for what we did, because we didn't build psychology. We didn't study psychology. We didn't study the kind of things we studied the structure of those things. So we went above the content and found the structures. And the name for that in logical terms is meta. We made a meta step in human communication. And we didn't know that we were being so clever at the time. We just thought it was fun and interesting.
Was it like, sorry, Cal, after you?
No, you're right.
I was going to say, was it like that at the beginning? Was it just a bunch of guys getting together, having a bit of fun, and without really knowing the map in front of you? It was just, we're enjoying this, let's continue doing it. Was it a bit like that? Or did you in your head think, I can see where this is going to be in another 40 years or 10 years or 5 years? Did you even know that it was going to be a system long term?
No, we didn't. John Grinder was the intellectual spark of the three of us.
Mm-hmm.
John Grinder was brilliant, and he was a very, very highly trained linguist. But he didn't know crap about psychology, or he didn't know how to use these incredible tools that he had helped build in any kind of a normal human way. And he was basically a super reasonable dork, but very, very smart. And he just didn't know how to walk up to somebody and say hello. You understand what I mean by that? It's like he was like, whoa, up here above everybody, not on purpose, just because he didn't know how to get on the ground. But Richard and I helped him with that a lot. And Richard and I were partners in the beginning when we were teaching Gestalt. John joined us, and after a period of time, it became the dynamic threesome. And John added an incredibly important characteristic of what Richard and I were doing. Richard and I were following the things that we learned with Gestalt and transactional analysis and conjoined family systems and other things. We were following the programs that we learned from those systems. Okay. And we were pretty good at doing that, but we weren't generating anything. We weren't generating any new ideas or new systems or anything. We were just using skills that we learned from somebody else. John came in and with John's knowledge of linguistic structures and just the fact that he's just so damned intelligent and had he was a college professor already, and a very famous college professor from a place in New York called, I can't remember, but a very famous university where great linguists studied linguistics. And he was one of them. When he came to Santa Cruz, he brought that with him. And he gave it to us, which was a bunch of hippie psychologist people, but we were pretty good at what we did, and we had developed a group of about 15 people.
Okay.
And this was called the Kresge group. Kresge was the name of the university at Santa Cruz that we were all part of.
Okay.
Santa Cruz had 6 campuses.
Okay.
6 major areas of intellectual endeavor. One of them was called, I don't remember what it was called, but it was the one that studied linguistics and studied and tried to do Gestalt and tried to do all the therapy systems, tried to figure out how the therapy systems work. And we called it meta, which is what it was.
Is the 15 people you're talking about, was it you who mentioned, like, not meta monsters, but meta team? Was there a meta team? There was a group? Did you have a name for yourselves?
Yeah, the name came later. The first thing we did was we just absolutely enjoyed the people that joined us. Richard and I were not the, here we go. Richard and I were not the most polite son of a bitches around. And when people tried to join us, Richard and I would decide whether that person was worth something or not,
Okay.
and whether we're going to let them join. So in the doing of that, for about 6 months, we ended up with a group of our students that we call Meta. Okay. And that group was a group of people that we thought were well educated, that understood linguistics pretty well, and had the right intention, that they really wanted to do something to help the psychology world stop being a world for goofballs.
Yeah.
The guys, before then, psychologists were game players. If I can use a bunch of fancy words, that means I'm smarter than you are.
Yeah.
And you have to do what I tell you, even if I can't tell you any way worth a damn to what to do, but do it anyway, because I'm really educated and I know all these big words: confluence, retroflexion, relationship, and all of these fancy psychological terms that mean basically the person who's using them, they're letting you know that I don't have a clue what the hell any of that means, but I've got these big words so that I can sound intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And basically that was psychology in the early days. Yeah.
Before we jump
Go ahead.
over and move on, I am really curious about this strange student that showed up in your lecture room, and you and Richard were down the front, not knowing who this guy was. How did he wander in there? Was there someone that said, "Hey, you got to check these guys out. They're doing some amazing stuff with Gestalt therapy." How did he know to be there, and why was he so curious about what you guys were doing?
We had no idea at the beginning, because he came in after the group started. He just walked in. We didn't know who he was to begin with. We thought he was some bum off the street, because he kind of looked like that.
Yeah. But
And so when he came in 2 or 3 times, and then at the end of the group, he didn't say anything. He just stood up and smiled and walked out with the rest of the people for like 3 or 4 times in a row. And so we didn't know who the hell he was, but we didn't care. He wasn't bothering anybody, so we didn't hassle him. And then after the 4th or 5th meeting, he stayed after everybody else left. And
But you never found out.
that's when the bubble burst. That's when the magic happened. That's when he started asking us questions about, why did we say this language structure after we heard this different language structure? What were you trying to do with that? Where did you get that? Where does that come from? And so he was asking us basically about how different, he didn't know this, about how different psychotherapy systems use language to try and help people figure out what the hell's going on in their head. Okay. They didn't do it well then, or they didn't do it skillfully, but they did it fairly powerfully. And we had powerful people in psychotherapy at that time, especially powerful gurus. Milton Erickson, oh Lord have mercy. If Milton Erickson told you to do something, you bowed and did it. It didn't matter what it was.
okay. So Milton Erickson had already really established himself as quite the influencer as such within this industry.
Yeah, in the unconscious forms, in hypnosis and so forth. Yeah, he had already established his creds. And what the funny part was, he was friends with Virginia Satir. Okay. And when Virginia Satir came to study with us, one of the first things that she said to me is, "Yo, Frank, I got it. I've been with you guys now for like 3 or 4 months. We got to go visit the great Milton Erickson." And I went, "Who?" Nobody knew. We didn't know who the hell that was.
Yeah.
And she said, "No, let's go. I know him. I can get us in. I want you to meet this man, and I want you to listen to him talk. It doesn't matter what he talks about. Just listen to the way he thinks." Okay.
Interesting.
When people talk, actually, they're demonstrating how they think.
Yeah. Listen to the way he thinks.
Yeah, exactly. And so I went, "Yeah, okay. I don't care." And so the next thing I know, I met this old fart that couldn't barely get out of the chair. he was talking like this all the time, you know. And but I could tell that he was unique and special, and I liked him. I liked who he was. He was a good man.
Mm.
And that became very, very obvious very quickly. And he cared about people. And that became very obvious very quickly. So for me, that's what I need to know about a person. If they're a good person and they care about people, then they're going to be a friend of mine. And I started, and Virginia said, we need to incorporate his skills into what you guys are doing. So that's when we decided to build in to Meta all of the language skills that we learned from him. You know?
Were they called Milton model language patterns from the get-go,
No.
or were they called?
No. Nobody knew much about Milton, and nobody knew much about whether this is a model or this is a whatever.
Yeah.
We were just taking very, very interesting communication from very, very special people and figuring out how to use it in a way that was helping other people with difficulties that they had.
Mm.
So I would learn something from Virginia, and then I would immediately turn around and go find people with the same problem and try and help them the way I learned from Virginia. Right. And then Fritz, and then Milton Erickson, and so until I got the transactional analysis that said, no way, no, I don't care. TA
in the early
was
days,
not my favorite thing, I promise you.
In the early days, Frank, did you end up getting a bit of a horde of people wanting to be guinea pigs? Did people start lining up to work with you guys because you were creating such change? Did it? How did you?
Not early.
How did the word get out as such?
Yeah. I don't know if you know anything about the structure of the University of California at Santa Cruz. The University of California at Santa Cruz is made up of 6 intellectual campuses.
Okay.
Some different buildings, but mostly that's not the difference. The difference is the philosophy of each university. And the University of California at Santa Cruz believes that they have 6 very different philosophies. Okay. And each one of them has very importance for certain things. Well, and the humanistic movement was one of them. And I liked that, and Richard didn't like that, but I didn't care. And Milton was that, whether he wanted to be or not.
Yeah.
Once we discovered who the hell he was, he was introduced to us by Virginia Satir. And I fell in love with Milton immediately, and I think he liked me. It was a little hard to tell who Milton liked and didn't like, because everything was in metaphors with him. Right? You understand? It's like, well, I think maybe that somebody should really carefully consider, and he talked like a ecology book, like a college book, but it was obvious to me that here is a crazy old man who really has something special and who honestly cares about people. That was my criteria then. If you're going to be anything to me, you're going to have to be a person who wants to help people be happy and be better, because that's what my area of interest at the time. And
yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask, is that how you got into learning Gestalt? Were yourself and Richard college students, and you got together and you had a common interest in helping people, and that was what drew you two together to work with each other?
Okay. So you're not going to publish some of these answers, right?
We're live.
We're only live. We're live on Facebook right now. So,
okay. Not exactly. We were a little more creative than that.
Okay.
And someday when you guys are all old enough or big enough to understand what I would tell you, I'll tell you. But before then, no.
All right. I get it.
We learned Gestalt because we had the opportunity to learn Gestalt.
Yeah.
And we studied with some really good gestaltists, including Fritz. We couldn't study with Fritz. He was already dead. But get ready for this. There was a guy named Bob Spitzer, who is the head of a publishing company called Science and Behavior Books. And that was the publishing company that published most of the early meta books or the early NLP books. He loved them and he published them and put them out into the world. So obviously we were happy about that because we were starting to get well known and people are coming to us. But we were basically trying to make money so that we could eat and so that we could do other things.
Okay.
So don't ask me what. So, but that was all. That was how things were done in those days. I'm sorry, we weren't angels in those days, and we probably should have gone to jail quite a few times, but we somehow escaped it. But we did a lot of what I consider to be very, very, very good work, and we built meta. The meta is an accumulation of 4 or 5 different models. It's not one model.
Yes.
It's the linguistic structure. It's the idea of complex equivalences. It's how you use your calibrations. It's how you influence communication with your nonverbal interactions. It's how you find out what the linguistic structure of the other person is, and then see how skillfully you can teach that person to talk differently, because if they talk differently, they're going to think differently. Okay. It's the first time we really realized that, wait. When a person talks, they're giving you how they think.
Yeah.
Well, when nobody really thought that before then. And it was like, no, I'm going to use Gestalt to help you. Well, you don't need to. They have their own Gestalt right in front of you. Just shut up and listen. And listen to how that person thinks and help them figure out how to use how they think, But Gestaltists used to change you so that they could fix you. And you end up being a goofball who walks around the streets spouting Gestalt realisms and lose yourself.
Right.
And that was Gestalt. You had to become a Gestaltist, which meant a super reasonable dork who was using big words to make other people feel inferior.
Super reasonable.
Yeah. So, we broke all of that up, and very much on purpose. And the guys, there was a group of us, about 10 or 12, that were mostly graduate students at Kresge, at the college that I was in the university. And when Richard and I were teaching Gestalt to some of those people, other people started joining, and we started teaching meta. Gestalt is a little bit super reasonable and a little bit goofy, but if you take it and you constructualize it so that it's more concrete and it's more real in words and language, it becomes a really useful system. So, and what we discovered is that what we did to do that was we created meta. And the rep systems, the meta model, the calibrations, the complex equivalences, and those things, those 6 structures are the source of all effective communication, as far as I know, in the world. If you know those 6 models and you can coordinate those 6 models, there is not a damn person you can't help, and there is not a damn thing you can't do from yourself, and there is nothing that's going to stop you from creating what you want to create. Because you have taught yourself how to think effectively.
This is, I think, something we should make a point of. So out of everything that you taught yourself, you've created yourself, you've learned yourself, you whittled it down to 6 core competencies, I guess. Can you unpack that?
6
for us a
core
little?
models.
6 core model.
The meta model has 9 linguistic distinctions. That's
Yes.
one model.
Okay.
Okay. Complex equivalences has a certain way of dealing with how you organize your thoughts, how you organize your processes, and what are the ideas and terms that you use to make meaning out of your
Yes.
life.
Okay.
Okay,
Meta
complex
model, complex
equivalences.
equivalence.
Yeah. What else? Calibrations. Calibrations are incredibly important because calibrations, most people, they don't realize it, but most of the important communication they have between people is not about their words. It's about their nonverbal communication.
Oh, yes.
Okay. But most people don't know how to control that or how to learn that or how to do that. So they just blunder along using language and hope that something comes out of it by some quirk of fate so that people get better or learn better
Yeah.
or whatever. But there are real models for all of that.
Mm.
Calibrations. Calibrations is a very complex subject, and most people think it just means your expression or something. It's much more than that. Okay. So calibrations, for example, if I'm communicating with somebody, then both of us are always communicating at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's no you talk, I listen, I talk,
Yeah.
you listen. That's not how it works. Okay. So when that person is talking to me, I am using my breathing and my posture and my head movements and my facial expressions and so forth to communicate to that person. Do I understand? Do I agree? Do I need more information? What about this? What about that? That I'm using all nonverbal communication as a key part of that person's talking.
Mm.
You understand?
Yeah.
So I think of that, the way I understand that is the talker is the orchestra. They're playing the instruments. The listener is the conductor.
Mm.
So
really
managing music. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. We're doing it right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you understand that, then you know that both people are always interacting and both people are always communicating with each other and both people are affecting where the person is going, what they're thinking, how they're thinking, and so forth. And my favorite thing to do, absolutely favorite thing to do, which I do most of the time now, is to have a conversation with the person where I don't ever talk.
Have a conversation with someone where you don't ever talk.
Yeah, but
Oh.
I control everything they say. I help them. I change them. With my nonverbal expressions, with my nonverbal communication, because nonverbal is far more powerful than verbal. Verbal gives you the question about, oh shit, what do they mean by that word?
Mm.
And a lot of times you don't know. Nonverbal, people always know what nonverbal means.
Mm.
Or if they don't know what it means for you, they know what it means for themselves, which is the same difference. And so when you understand that there are these are models, what we call models. The nonverbal communication, when I'm communicating nonverbally to somebody else, is one way. When they're communicating to me verbally and I'm managing their verbal communication with my nonverbal, that's another whole way to communicate. That there's just an incredible amount of artful skill and important value in all of those models and all those characteristics. Okay. And the words are one of the least valuable thing in the whole mess. You know, why? Because words only mean what they mean to the person who says them. And that has nothing to do with what that word means to the person who heard it.
Yeah.
Mm.
You know, they're completely different.
Hey guys, Callum and Connor here from Connekt Coaching. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Unplugged Podcast. We're jumping in to let you know about something really exciting, the Forever Client Matrix.
Absolutely. What we love doing is lighting people up and having them realize that their future is bright and, most importantly, making a difference in this world. So we are very excited to be able to share this with you.
If you want to turn every prospect into a Forever Client, then please click on the link below in the description and get instant access now to your preview of the Forever Client Matrix.
Enjoy.
And you're talking about calibration, and a lot of people do that unconsciously. So they're not aware of their effect on other people's communication. They're not aware that they're the conductor. They're not aware that the way that their subtle shifts and changes that are happening in their expression and their body movement and their body position is affecting the communication style of the person that's speaking to them. But what you're saying is that you've done it, you do it consciously because you make a point of not talking. You make a point of sitting there in the chair, and you are absolutely aware, acutely aware that you are the conductor and you're making changes through those subtle shifts that you use. When you call that a model, obviously we've learned sensory acuity and we've learned, how to take those snapshots between one picture to another and understand how people apply meaning to those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
When you call it a model though, and you talk about it as if you're the conductor and you're doing those things consciously with awareness, with volition, have you mapped that out? Have you mapped out how to do that? Because I feel like it would be quite intuitive and sensory based. It's more of a kinesthetic adjustment that you're making based on the effect that you're seeing in the client or the person sitting in front of you.
Yeah. Okay. I understand. And I'll try and be gentle. When two people are talking to each other, back and forth or whatever they're doing, or communicating with each other, the one that's speaking is giving a certain kind of information. The one that's listening is also giving information. They're adjusting the speaking with their expressions and so forth. Okay. So they are also controlling the conversation when they listen. Okay. Because all of that, especially the nonverbal parts, all of that is not concrete. It's not sentence structure. It's not this word means this word means that. And in fact, it's better if it doesn't, because when we start paying attention to words and the meaning of words, that's when the vast majority of all effective communication stops. And that's when the person who's talking has taken over as the person who knows, and the person who's listening is the dumb shit who doesn't know anything. And there are people who take advantage of that, like psychologists and so forth. But it's much more fun for me and much more interesting for me to listen to people talk, knowing that whatever the hell they're saying doesn't mean the same to me that they're trying to communicate. That's okay. So what I do is I try to help them non-verbally. So if I don't understand something that they're telling me, and it seems to me because they've repeated it twice that it's important to them, okay, I'll do this.
Got it.
If I ask them, can you tell me that again? They're going to get lost and they're going to get confused and they're not going to know what to say and all of that. But if I can do that with my face, or my gestures, then they don't even notice that. They just add more information.
Yeah.
Right.
Which to me, I find absolutely delightful. So my favorite way to have a conversation with somebody is they do all the talking and I do all the manipulating.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I mean, all of the professional communicating. Yeah. You understand, because I might want to get something from that person. And what I know is if they ask them to direct questions, number one, that's going to kind of be challenging for them. Number two, they might not know how to answer those questions. Number three, I'm interrupting them. And if you actually meta model somebody, by the time they've talked to you for 15 minutes, they would prefer to kill you.
If you did it all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, you understand? Because the meta model is like, well, what do you mean by it? And what happens if that goes? And what's that word mean? I don't know that word. What that is? It's very challenging, you know? And if I'm talking to somebody and they're challenging me like that, after about 15 seconds, I say, excuse me, I have to go do something relevant. Bye.
Yeah.
No thanks. So,
You-
but, if I can manage, one of my favorite things to do is I go to a place, there's a guy speaking to 8 or 10 people, right? And those 8 or 10 people are trying to ask questions or and they're confusing the hell out of everything. And I stand there and I just get a very nice calibration, very nice personal confluence, right? And whenever the guy says something that he actually seems to know something about, I'll do this. Right? And if somebody interrupts him or tries to argue with him, I'll look at them and I'll do this.
Okay.
You understand? So I shut up the idiots and I support the guy who's trying to give something of value.
Yeah.
And I help them give something of value by adjusting what they're saying with face expressions and breathing.
Based on the feedback they're getting from you with your nonverbal communication.
Yeah. And most of the time, people don't even know that's happening.
Correct. 100%. I agree there. And I think a lot of people do it almost unconsciously.
Yeah. And
that
if they did it well, that's fine. But sometimes they're doing it unconsciously. It doesn't work very well. But yeah.
Where does rapport fit into this? Is that just a presupposition that you're already in rapport? Or, and also cultures, different cultures. So
different cultures, you have to learn the culture.
Yeah.
If you're going to step into a culture, that culture has rules and it has acceptable behaviors and unacceptable behaviors. And some of those are very subtle. And so you have to learn, if you're going to be in that culture for any period of time, if you're new to the culture and everybody knows you're the idiot from America or whatever, then they'll give you a week or two to be an idiot.
A bit of grace
before they shoot you.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is fine. But if you're going to be there for any period of time, you better get busy learning all of those nonverbal nuances and how they work. And you better get the idea that you're the foreigner, shut up. Because a lot of times foreigners go places and they try to show how smart they are by talking all the time. And the locals just after about 15 minutes would they'd rather just shoot the guy and move on to somebody else. But so there's just so many subtleties. I like to manage a conversation that somebody else is talking by supporting what they're saying, by appreciating the things that they say that I think are good or relatively important or so forth, and by constantly giving them feedback that says, wow, ooh, oh yeah, but without the words, without the noises, right? And smaller. The smaller you can do it, the more effect it has, not the bigger. If you do big gestures, you just look like a moron. But so you have to do, if you're going to do gestures as a part of your normal communication and expressions and so forth, you need to really, really, really make them as small as possible.
Subtle. Yeah.
So that the other person, if they're watching you, they almost can't tell that you're doing or thinking anything other than just listening. But if you're really good, you listen, you do more than listen. And I like that. That's fun for me. And I like to help people be successful in their communication. A lot of people don't do group communication very well. And they get lost and they get worried and they get whatever. So I try to get in that group, don't talk, and just calm the person down, let them know that I think they're wonderful. And every time they say something to give them that has any merit whatsoever. I give them a little bit of wow, yeah, ooh, yeah, and so I get a chance to let them know that they have value, let them know that they're being successful, let them know that I like them, let them know that I'm very happy to listen and learn from them.
Mm.
And if I can do that successfully in a group of 4 or 5 people where I'm the only person that's actually helping the speaker speak, the rest of them are jerks. Huh? Yeah, yeah. You know, I can calm the person down and keep the speaker on track
On track.
and let them know that at least one person in that room thinks they're wonderful.
Mm. Now that would make a huge difference to them as well.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Yeah,
So-
and just I do that kind of, I was gonna say naturally, but it's not natural. I had to learn how to do it. But I like people,
Yeah.
and I like listening to people, and I enjoy people, and especially people who are excited about what they're saying or think they're really smart and doing something really cool, whether they are or not. I don't care.
Yeah. This is really
But I enjoy them, and so I just enjoy it. And my enjoying them usually helps them feel better and successful and competent and so forth. Why not?
And with that, what we just spoke about with the nonverbal communication, is that still under the umbrella of calibration, or was that a different model?
Nonverbal communication is the bulwark, the whole thing. Okay. Calibrations is one of the characteristics of that whole thing. It's not the whole thing. But calibrations, movements, nonverbal sounds, touches, like sometimes when a person says something really cool, I'll just reach over and tap them on the shoulder, and then and with that, and don't say anything else. And I can see them,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, and then when they do that, I give them the feedback. It's like, and they know that I liked it. They know that I learned something from it. They know that I like them. And the conversation goes fine and wonderful.
Mm.
And especially works well with women.
So,
Yeah.
so I feel like I want to continue on with the 6, but before we get there, when did it go from meta to NLP? At what point was it? Okay, we're doing meta.
I can tell you exactly when. I think it'll be funny for you. It'll be interesting anyway.
All right.
I was engaged to a woman that I loved a lot. In fact, I had 2 wives for a period of time, Judith DeLozer and Leslie Cameron. Okay. You recognize that name, Leslie
Those
Cameron?
names sound familiar. They certainly do.
Yeah. Okay, good. And they were my wives at the same time. In fact, we slept together, the 3 of us, for 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Friendly, but more than friendly often.
Okay.
But that was Santa Cruz, and that was what you did in Santa Cruz. I mean, multiple marriages and all of that bit. It was all normal, and that's what people did. What was the question you asked me? I was answering.
It was the transition from meta to NLP.
We didn't have a name for it in the beginning.
Yeah.
It was the research group from the students at the university, learning from John and Richard and me when we first started the actual formal training.
Mm-hmm.
That had developed from the group that Richard and I did on Gestalt. And the first meta people were the Gestalt people. So when we shifted to meta was when John came in and joined the group much more explicitly and started teaching us meta model and linguistics and the other things that added to the influence and the impact of what we were already doing. And that was the birth of meta. And that was in 1972.
Okay.
And 1971. The first year, in fact, let me make sure that I get this right. Okay. Because just in case somebody says, well, no, that was this way, because they might be right. Okay. Richard and John and I built meta from 1965 to 1970.
Okay, for 5 years.
Actually, 1969 or so.
Okay.
Richard and I and John started taking meta to the world. It was just ours, the three of us,
Mm.
and a few students from the university. But that group kept growing because people were getting excited at the university, and more people. So we realized that we could make some money for drugs, and so that we figured that was a good idea. So we started charging them money, and we ended up with about 25 people who were paying money 3 times a week to learn meta. But we needed to teach them something besides Gestalt. So we decided to teach them linguistics. And the meta model is a totally linguistic model that John Grinder gave me. And we then had, once you have the meta model and once you have some idea of how psychology works, then you can take the magic jump to complex equivalences,
Yeah.
calibrations, and those kind of things, because those things become obviously important and obviously necessary. But you got to have the base.
Yeah. Okay.
Psychologists didn't have the base. They wanted to call it confluence and retroflexion, and so that they could be intelligent and wonderful. But that wasn't it. So we coined the term. You'll like this term. I think you know it already. Chunking down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we were the first ones that were taking complex psychological phenomenon and chunking it down ad infinitum to its basic root structure. And when we did that, that was a group of about 10 of us, including Richard and including John. And we started to understand, holy shit, if we can do that with a linguistic model from Virginia, with Fritz, we can do that with a hell of a lot of other things, like because linguistic models are everywhere. And scientists use different kind of linguistic models. Parents, parenting, calibrations, Gestalt, the family system, everything uses a model, a therapeutic model of some kind. Okay. Well, if you chunk all of those down, you know what you find out? They're all the same. It's the names that are different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. And so if you call something confluence and then in another system you call it retroflexion, then you think they're two different things.
They're the same.
If you chunk it all down, it's the same damn thing. Okay. So we started chunking down everything and everybody. And we had fun for sure. I tell you what. And so then once we did that, we started to turn around and used all that chunk down information to build real models.
Okay.
To build structures like complex equivalences. What does that mean? What are parts of complex equivalences? How does that work? How do you create them? How do you build them? How do you change them? How do you decide whether that's a good one or a bad one or whatever? What are all the decision structures that go along with these fancy ideas that people have never figured? Well, wait a minute. You can't just use that word because that word is too big and has too much meaning, and it's actually dangerous. Let's chunk it down. Let's see what it really is.
Okay.
And so we were maniacs, and that was meta. Meta is, do you know what the word means? Above, beyond, or about. That's what meta means, literally. Okay. Which is the perfect definition for chunking down.
What you were doing. Yeah.
Yeah. Is breaking up what we're doing into usable. We had a rule. If you can't chunk it down to specific measurable behavior, you don't know what the hell you're talking about. Shut up.
Okay.
You understand?
And then, over time it became NLP. What's the
no, okay, no, like this. I had a long-term lover.
Okay.
A lady named Leslie Cameron. And I was also married to Judy at the same time. And Leslie had a son and I had a son, and we were one big happy family. 2 women, 2 kids, and me. Okay. Oh, and 3 Labradors,
Okay.
great dogs. Yeah. And that was my family for a while.
Right.
And that was during the first 2 years of neuro-linguistic programming, or meta, from 70 to 72 or 3. Okay. Then Richard decides that he loves Leslie.
Okay.
Okay. And so he started talking to Leslie about becoming famous and going with him. And because Pucelik is not going to do anything, he's going to be a people person all of his life, and he's not going to make much money. So come with me and whatever. So he broke up the two of us. But what he knew, and she said, okay, good, let's do it. Because she was a little more money conscious than I was. But we still worked together.
Yeah.
That did not work for Richard. Why? Because Richard knew that every time he looked at Leslie's face, he knew that Leslie still loved me. He could read it on her face.
Ah.
And it was true.
Yeah.
She did. And so the only answer for Richard at that time was to take him and Leslie and get the fuck out of Dodge, or take me the fuck out of NLP.
Right.
And he tried to do both. And he actually challenged me to a fight one day when he was trying to make sure that Leslie knew that he was big and brave. And he had a minor difficulty because he forgot that I had been a soldier and already been in a war, and I knew some things about fighting a dipshit that he didn't know.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so I said to him, I would love to have a fight with you, but you better make sure your medical insurance is paid up.
All right.
And he backed off. But what he did was he backed off and he took Leslie and John and disappeared. And so I'm there with the meta people. We still had those 8 or 10 people. Most of them were from San Diego. They all came from the University of California at San Diego to go to graduate school at Santa Cruz. I'm from San Diego. So I moved to San Diego. A bunch of them went with me, and we reopened, get ready for this, you'll recognize this name, Meta International in San Diego. That's when the name was born. It wasn't Meta before that.
Did Mark Zuckerberg have to pay you royalties for that name? Because doesn't
Who?
he own Mark Zuckerberg? Doesn't he own it now? The owner of Facebook?
He better pay me because I had it long before he did.
That's what I mean. Does he have to pay you?
Yeah, long before he did. Yeah. So it was. I actually was fine.
Yeah.
I had Santa Cruz was a very interesting place. If you wanted a couple, 2 or 3 extra girlfriends, just snap your finger and point, and you would have 2 or 3 extra girlfriends.
Interesting.
But they were usually very good at satisfying your urges. So
Right.
Cruz was wonderful, and I didn't mind. And when I moved to San Diego, I took about 8 or 9 of the original Meta people to San Diego with me.
Yeah. Okay.
He opened Meta International, and we spread NLP throughout America, not John and Richard. John and Richard get credit for doing that. They didn't do shit.
Right.
They took both of my wives. John married my first wife. Richard married my second wife, and the 4 of them took off to become famous doing NLP and make money, and didn't really spread the faith. So that was my job. So that's what I did in San Diego. And if it wasn't for me, I don't think most people would know what the hell NLP ever was.
This is fascinating. And when you moved to San Diego, because I know you've done a lot of business consulting, business coaching, business training. You're now living in Ukraine. Huge difference from San Diego. How did that transition from teaching meta in its essence to being a world leading in the top 100 business consultants in the world?
Yeah. Yeah, I get told that once in a while. I'm I know what I built,
Mm.
and I didn't have any ego problems with who gets credit for it or any of that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because for me, it was what gave me a life. My development of the meta model was what I used to become a human being. I was in a war
Mm.
and I killed people, and I was a doctor in the war, and I lost 5 of my soldiers in my hands that bled to death because I couldn't stop the bleeding,
Mm.
and they were just shot to hell. And I blamed myself for that for lots of years. So for the first 10 years after I came back from Vietnam, I was a mess. I was dangerous. It took me 5 years to learn how to talk to people, normal people, because in the war, you don't talk normal. You use combat language or soldier to soldier language. And I was a doctor. I carried a rifle, and when it was time to shoot people, I was perfectly happy to do that, especially when they were trying to shoot me.
Mm.
And but the war changed me. It really did. And it took me 10 years after the war to figure out whether I wanted to keep that stuff or change it or what could I do with it or whatever. The first 5 years after the war, I was just walking zombie.
Yeah.
And I wasn't fun to be around, and I was actually a bit dangerous because I was very, very reactive.
Yeah. Reactive.
And especially because in America at the time, there was a lot of anti-war sentiment.
Mm.
And it's not the best person to be around if you're going to tell me that the guys who went to Vietnam were all stupid assholes,
Mm.
because I would prove that they were right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So it that second 5 years, I grew up.
Yeah.
I had no choice. And thank God for John Grinder. I thank 3 people for me being a human: Virginia Satir, John Grinder, and God.
Mm.
Plus, I was very, very lucky because I married a woman who was my sweetheart from earlier, Judith Delosier, and we had a child, and I absolutely loved
Mm.
that kid more than I loved me, much more. And I spent the next 8 years with him,
Mm.
taking him places, teaching him things. People always knew that if you want Frank, you're going to get him and the 3 Labradors and his son. So
Yeah.
you want him, you're getting all of them, which they did. And most of the people, the dogs were incredibly well trained. They were female Labradors, 1 gold and 2 blacks, big dogs. And I would walk into a room with the dogs and my son, and Eric had a little bag of toys, and he would sit at the table with me whatever the meeting was, and play with his toys quietly. And I would look at the corner of the room and just nod, and those 3 dogs would go over there and chumble and lay down and not move a muscle the whole time. And they were just wonderful. And when it was time to go, they wouldn't budge until they saw me look at them and go. And then they would get up and go, unless they had to go to the bathroom. But I knew the looks on their faces. I would just say to one of the dogs who was letting me know, I'm going to pee my pants, Then I would look at them and go and just say, go. And that dog would get up, leave the room, and come back. So they were incredibly well trained.
Yeah.
And I think they trained me more than I trained them,
Well,
because they were absolutely good. And I guarantee you, when Eric was with the dogs on the street somewhere, nobody messed with Eric.
I bet. Very
Yeah.
protective.
3 big, beautiful, fearless Labradors. And if people had gotten near Eric and they had the wrong vibe, they had the wrong expression, those 3 dogs would just stand there and look at them and just do this. And growl low.
Yeah,
Really
Labradors are such friendly dogs, but when they show their teeth, something's wrong. It's either like it's a big green light, But when you see the red, you know that there's this.
And they had this growl kind of underneath, and the people knew whatever I was going to do, I'm not going to do that now, because the dogs would step in between Eric and the person, and the person would look at me and go, "Am I okay?" And I say, "Yes, if you back up. I'll introduce you to the dogs, and then the dogs will let you play with Eric. But don't just walk up to Eric without being introduced to the dogs, because they'll have you for dinner." And they would. They were very protective of Eric. Me too, but I could take care of myself. Yeah.
So
Wonderful dogs.
Frank, if someone wants to learn from you now, how would they connect with you? We spoke about. Let's finish off the six models. We have meta, we have complex equivalences, we have verbal or nonverbal communication, calibration. Are you able to share the final three?
Those are two different things, by the way. Nonverbal communication and calibrations are two different skill sets.
Got it. Okay, so that they would be models 4 and 5, 3 and 4.
Yeah, and 6 is systematic use of negation.
Ah,
yeah, it's very important to understand. Do you know what that is? Systematic use of negation.
Using
Systematic use of negation. Do you know what that is?
I haven't heard it called systematic use of negation.
Every time you use a word, that word has a connotation. Okay. And if a word has a negative connotation and you use it, then that negative connotation is going to be felt and or understood by everybody in the room, whether you meant it to be negative or not, doesn't matter. Okay. And most of the times when you use a negative word, along with that negative word is some kind of negative calibration. Okay. Systematic use of negation gives you the opportunity to use two kinds of words, not positive and negative, but positive and positive. So I'm happy or I'm not happy yet. You hear? So I'm happy or not happy yet. So, or I could say I'm happy or I'm miserable. Okay. No, I don't do that. I say I'm comfortable and I'm getting more comfortable with him every day. Well, I could say, and I don't like that asshole.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You know, so systematic use of negation is so that you can say good things by using good words, and you can say bad things by using not bad words, but good words. So not good or good. So you end up with two kinds of calibrations, good and good.
That's right.
So what the hell? Why not? It works. Most people don't realize this when they use a negative word. To me, a lot of people use negative words for positive thoughts. Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Why did you do that? That you did that wrong. You should do this. Wrong, stupid. What? You don't have to use those words. Because those words have a meaning. They have a connotation. They have a whole source of experience behind them. That from years and years and years and years, from the time you were 3 years old, you were using or hearing those negative words. And you're still using the same damn negative words in your normal conversation and you're 50? Get out of here. That's ridiculous. Yeah. Why? Because words affect thoughts, affect behavior, affect emotion, affect everything, the words you use. So I very much prefer to be not comfortable when I'm not comfortable and incredibly comfortable when I am comfortable. Okay, so I know what not comfortable means logically, but I'm not experiencing it.
Gotcha.
Okay, I don't say the word because I want to experience. I don't say. Most people do just the opposite. They say stupid and not stupid. So they use negation to bring in more powerful negative terms
Mm.
into a conversation that they're trying to have a normal, decent conversation, a positive conversation. And what they're doing, they're killing it by using negation backwards. Not bad. How you doing? Not bad. What? Do you understand what not bad means?
Yeah.
Not something, but bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
The principle of don't think of a blue tree is one that I've heard a lot. You have to
What?
do not think of a blue tree, Frank. And
Oh,
you have to think of
yeah.
a blue tree to not think of a blue tree.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. It's just an example of understanding that when you use the complex equivalent for something, meaning the complex word, it carries with it its history and its connotation and its meaning. It always will and always does. If you've heard a negative term used negatively 10,000 times in your lifetime, and so now you decide that I want to use the same word, but in a positive way, so it's not going to work. You even look like you're lying. Do you understand? If you use a negative word, like I'm not bad, right? And bad for you has been a bad thing for 40 years. And so you say, I'm not bad. You hear it?
Yeah.
Not bad. Okay. Well, what's the connotation? Where's the power in that phrase? What are you trying to say? Well, why not just say fucking sick? Instead of not bad. Because then you destroy the whole meaning of the sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So systematic use of negation is really an effective tool for being wonderful or not wonderful yet.
Got it. Brilliant.
I like it.
Well, we like it, Frank. And if someone, before we sort of talk about how someone can get in contact with you, you brought this into business. So do you teach Meta as a certification as such, or have you the last 15 years or so, from what I've read, your focus has mainly been in the business development side? Is that accurate, or has there been both?
Yeah, mainly is an important word because it's not only.
Yeah.
I'll never stop working in the human communication milieu, but business. Everything that we do, we use words typically to describe the things that we do, whatever that is. Okay. When you are describing something that you do, what is the connotation of the nouns and adjectives that you're using? What are those words conveying? Okay. If those words are negative based words, it doesn't do you any good to say not negative. Well, I'm not upset. Well, bullshit, you're upset. Everybody knows it. Okay. Or even if you're not upset, you said the word upset, and most people mark the word the same way they mark it when they use it negatively. I'm not upset.
Yeah.
They don't say I'm not upset. That's not how they say it. Right. And so once you understand, whoa, guys, I try to teach people, hey, you are responsible in your life and in the life of people that are important to you, that are in your life, for being the source of positive emotions, positive feelings, for successful reactions and successful interactions, and creating joy and happiness around you all day long, every day.
Right.
That's what you can do as a professional, successful human being. Okay. And so how to do that? Well, I just gave you a demonstration of how to do that. I could have used negative words for every one of those concepts. And most people use negative words when they're trying to describe something positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I try to do is I try to teach myself, I'm still teaching myself, that to use either positive words or not positive words in all of my verbal communication.
And in both
Sometimes
cases,
give
the focus is
examples
still
of,
on the positive word.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I like to mark those words or anchor those words, or maybe some different term you have for them. Because when I use a positive term, I just go, ba-da, ba-da, da-da, da-da, da-da. No. Ba-da, da-da, ba-da, ba-da, da-da, da-da, ba-da, da-da. Okay.
Yeah.
So everybody knows, who listens to me talk, knows what the words are in there that have the positive connotation and that they are good things. Okay. And just like, and I do that on purpose. And I try to do that as skillfully as I possibly can, as often as I possibly can. I like people and I want people to be happy, and people learn to talk from, pardon my non-specific use of this, from assholes who teach them that everything in life is negative.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of that.
And sometimes they even try to talk about positive things, but they use negative terms.
Yeah.
Mm.
You can hear
And
it.
you just kind of go, whoa, dude.
So
And
if someone would like to refine their communication, Frank, and learn from you directly, how would they find you? Do they have to travel to the Ukraine? Do you do anything online? Is there a website people can find
sure,
you at?
if they look up my name on the internet, they're
Mhm.
going to see a lot of websites.
There's a lot
And
out
there
there.
are a couple of them that say NLP. Anyway, they can find me. I'm there all over the place. And the one thing that I would recommend is for them to try and find on my sites the name of Svetlana,
Okay.
Svetlana Fedoruk, because she's the manager of all of those sites, and she's the one who comes to me and says, "I got a request from this person to do this and this and this. I think it's a good idea. I arranged for this situation. I arranged for it to be done at this time
Perfect.
because I knew you were gonna not want to talk to him for 35 minutes in order to get 2 minutes of information."
Got
Okay.
it. Got it.
So she takes care of all of that for me. Yeah, I'm happy to talk to people like you guys.
We're happy
And so
about that.
that's fine. But I don't like, there are people who like to ask me 1,000 questions, you know, and like after the first 1,000, I'm kind of going, look, dude, what the hell's the point?
Mm,
You got everything you're going to get from me. That's it. Game over.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not, I'm usually not that polite, but anyway.
I mean, you have such rich history. Your knowledge is incredible, and I'm sure are people out there who would love to model what you've created and what you've done. They can use it in there.
I would be glad, if, for example, if you guys decide that you want to put the group together with 10 or 15 people and you want to meet with me once a week for 2 hours or something like that, and help your group ask questions that they might have about meta, about me, about the beginnings, about anything that they want to know about, I'd be happy to do that. And once a month or twice a month would be fine with me. If they want to put a little bit of money in it, that would be great too, but it's not necessary.
Mhm.
And I'm happy to share and happy to talk. And besides, I'm in the middle of a war zone. I can't do much else right now.
Yes,
And
I
I'd love to talk to you more about that. I mean, I think we're running out of time today because it's late for you, but I do really want to dive into your work with returning soldiers from war zones, the work that you're doing with PTSD, what it's like in Odessa at the moment, and the current sort of state of things with people's mindset, and how you're assisting with the recovery for a lot of those guys that are returning from the front lines. So
Yeah.
I think we'd love to have you back for a second session. I'd also love to take you up on that opportunity to have you come to, a webinar or a workshop with us and talk to our community that absolutely love that. I know they would. So I think I'd love to stay in touch. Connor and I are very grateful that you made time for us today and that you stayed up late for us. It's been a great honor to have you here.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be happy to be involved with you in whatever way you find valuable.
On behalf of Connekt Coaching and our community, and Callum, I'd love to say thank you very much for your time. As Cal said, it's been an honor to have you here, and we will have you back very, very soon.
Hey guys, Callum and Connor here from Connect Coaching. I hope you're enjoying this episode of the Unplugged Podcast. We're jumping in to let you know about something really exciting. If you are a practitioner, a coach, or a trainer in the alternative therapy modality space, the Forever Client Matrix is something that we've modeled in the last 30 combined years, both Connor and my experience. And we've turned it into a 2-day intensive, and we want to give you a preview of that, the Forever Client Matrix.
Absolutely.
We want to make the bar for them to enter into that program very, very low and have them get incredible results.
I've sold about $40 million worth, and together we've sold about $100 million worth with our teams.
That's right. We believe that trust and reliability is the currency of the future. So if you want to turn every transaction into a transformational experience, if you want to turn every prospect into a forever client, then please click on the link below in the description and get instant access now to your preview of the Forever Client Matrix.
Enjoy.